It seems as though, for the time being, when it comes to Star Wars, Disney sees fit to treat the symptoms, but not the sickness. Stick around and we'll talk about it. Hello, I'm Marvin, and I'm the Movie Monster. Star Wars has been dying a slow, painful death since Disney purchased the property back in 2012. It started innocently enough with The Force Awakens and Rogue One, but then The Last Jedi hit, and the agenda of a Lucasfilm without George Lucas became abundantly clear. Destroy what came before and inject as much modern-day social justice into the property as humanly possible. It also seemed as though older fans of the franchise weren't welcomed anymore. Now, Disney was courting a younger audience, a more diverse audience, a modern audience, an audience that doesn't exist. Or at the very least, doesn't exist in the volume needed to reach profitability. Star Wars has been failing and dying, and the final straw seemed to come from The Acolyte, headed up by Harvey Weinstein's former personal assistant, Leslye Headland. This was, without a doubt, the single worst piece of Star Wars media ever put to the screen. It was a commercial and critical failure with a reported budget of $180 million. Now, we've been over this show's failures on this channel repeatedly, so I don't feel the need to go into them here again. However, it seems as though Disney finally had enough and decided to cut this tumor out of Star Wars once and for all. The Acolyte was canceled loudly and publicly last week, and for a moment, fans had hope again. Then news broke that Taika Waititi, a director who I personally enjoy when he's doing his own original work, but he's the absolute last guy you want working on an established and respected IP like Star Wars, was let go, with his Star Wars movie now joining so many other scrap projects on the Lucasfilm compost heap. All good news, right? Not so fast, monsters. It seems as though while Disney is looking in the right direction and eliminating some problematic elements from the board, they're still doing nothing about the cause of the problem, the root of the issue, the actual cancer behind the tumors. And we're going to talk about that today on Tooneytown TV. All right, so we have a rumor here. Lucasfilm has scrapped Taika Waititi's Star Wars film, and Leslye Headland is completely out at Lucasfilm. Now, this is what we call a step in the right direction, and this is an article from That Bach Place, written by our friend John F. Trent, the editor-in-chief over there. So he says, a new rumor claims that Lucasfilm is permanently scrapping Taika Waititi's Star Wars film and that Leslye Headland is permanently out at Lucasfilm. Now, this is good news because Taika Waititi, look, I personally like him when he is focused on original things. I love What We Do in the Shadows. I like a lot of his original movies. I think they're good. They're funny. They have a good sense of humor. But when you put him when you have him involved in an established IP like what Marvel learned the hard way with Thor. Now Thor Ragnarok, he had his hand held for the whole time, so he couldn't really do anything. But then when they let him go nuts with Thor: Love and Thunder, well, we all saw what happened. That movie was a train wreck, and because Taika Waititi doesn't have any respect or awe for an IP. Which, yes, there's such a thing as having too much respect for an IP, like Dave Filoni, who allows his awe of Star Wars to kind of get in the way of telling actual stories. But then there's people like Taika Waititi who have no respect for it and go out of their way to ruin it. Like, it's Taika Waititi, that's Rian Johnson. We're about to find out it's probably going to be Shami Obaid-Chinoy. But it goes on to say, the rumor comes from Matt McGloin at Cosmic Book News, who reports, conversations I've had with insiders at the recent Comic-Con have informed me that Taika Waititi is definitely not doing his Star Wars movie at Lucasfilm. He adds, I was also actually told by this insider that Leslye Headland is done at Lucasfilm. Now, that would go with what we're all hearing about The Acolyte, about Leslye Headland. It's completely done. She's completely done. Any hopes that she had of doing some kind of season 2, which was obviously canceled, or doing, God forbid, a Knights of the Old Republic live action show the way she wanted to, those are completely scrapped. All those thoughts are completely scrapped. And there she is there with Kathleen Kennedy and Dave Filoni, the two root causes of the problem, which are still apparently, we'll get to that. But as for why Waititi is out, McGloin's insider informed him it was due to Thor: Love and Thunder, and specifically that Waititi did not actually finish the movie. McGloin detailed that his insider informed him that the film was a complete disaster and Marvel gave him the boot from the movie. That's interesting. That's something I hadn't heard before. Furthermore, McGloin explained, I was also told Waititi didn't finish the reshoots of the final cut of the movie. He speculates that Marvel finished the film themselves rather than bringing in a new director. McLoy then declared, "My insiders have said as a result that Taika Waititi is out at Lucasfilm and not doing his Star Wars movie." This is kind of in keeping with the Lucasfilm playbook of recent years. They hire a director, that director does something else somewhere else and bombs terribly, and then they get rid of that director from doing a Star Wars project. We saw it with Patty Jenkins. She made Wonder Woman into a sexual assailant, and they immediately got rid of her from doing her Rogue Squadron movie. And then we saw it with Benioff and Weiss, the Game of Thrones guys. They were hired to do a Star Wars movie, and then all of a sudden, Game of Thrones, the last season of two seasons of Game of Thrones happened, and they were so god awful. And then all of a sudden, they need to go focus on their Netflix projects. Let me tell you something. There is no Netflix project on the planet important enough to make somebody stop doing Star Wars. They were fired. Rian Johnson was supposed to do a trilogy. Then he did The Last Jedi, and we're not seeing Rian Johnson's trilogy anytime soon. But, I mean, if he didn't even finish the Thor movie, yeah, there's no way Disney's ever bringing him back for anything. And he was so down on even doing these Thor movies. He made it very clear he was doing it just for the money. He has no respect for the IP. Gleefully talked about how he would burn your mythology to the ground, which is really saying something when you're referring to actual, like, mythology gods that are part of somebody's culture, like the Norse gods. Because, I mean, like, the first two Thor movies actually treated those gods with some reverence and kind of kept them true. But he turned this entire pantheon of gods that are so connected to Norwegian culture into just this bumbling group of buffoons, because everything with him has got to have that same sense of humor. And it works in things like What We Do with the Shadows. It did not work in Marvel. It worked in Ragnarok, I thought, even though it kind of like changed the characters completely from the way they were. Ragnarok was still a fun movie, and I think that was because Marvel was still kind of holding his hand and being like, "Look, you have some wiggle room, but you have to operate within these boundaries." I don't think in Love and Thunder he had any such boundaries, because at that point his name had blown up and he was Taika Waititi, and Ragnarok made a lot of money. Now he was IG-11 on The Mandalorian. He did a fine job there. I liked IG-11 a lot. He directed a couple episodes, including the season 1 finale, and he was great at that. I thought it was great because he wasn't writing and directing. He didn't have full creative control over that. A TV director that has very little control over the final product that you actually see. Waititi did admit during an appearance on the Smartless podcast in November of 2023 that the only reason he made the Thor movies was for the paycheck. He said, "I had no interest in doing one of those films. It wasn't on my plan for my career as an auteur." Ugh. I'm sorry. If you call yourself an auteur, you deserve to fall down on the sidewalk and skin your knees and have it hurt for at least 3 days. Because, good Lord, an auteur. Shut up. Shut up. You're not an auteur. You are not an auteur. You make silly jokes and people laugh at them, and you're good at that. Stop. Don't ruin it by calling yourself an auteur. Good Lord. He goes, "But I was poor and I just had a second child, and I thought, you know what? This would be a great opportunity to feed these children." And now I never fault anyone for taking that bag, for taking the money and doing something solely for the money. Which I don't fault him for that at all. But I mean, he really went out of his way. Once after Ragnarok, once he was established, I mean, he just like went out of his way to just mock and belittle these characters. It was just clear that he had no actual respect for the property. So they called and they said, "Do you want to do this?" And Thor, let's face it, was probably the least popular franchise. I never read Thor comics as a kid. That was the comic I pick up and be like, ugh. And then I did some research on it, and I read one full comic or 18 pages, or however long they are, and I was still baffled by this character. Man, that's really a great vote of confidence from the guy that's supposed to be directing the property. Good Lord. Thank God he's not doing Star Wars. I thought that if there's anything I could bring, it was character. Just looking at Thor as a character, he's a billionaire who lives in space, and he looks ridiculous, and that was sort of the end of that. I was like, let's highlight that. He's a rich kid. I pitched that he's a bit like you and me. Jason, that he hates germs. Oh, good Lord. What? You're bringing modern day sensibility to a Norwegian god and to a comic book character that using, he's a billionaire who lives in space. He's a rich kid. No, he's not. He's Thor. He's the god of thunder. Thank God you're gone. He told Business Insider that he'd no longer be involved with the franchise while promoting his film Next Goal Wins in November 2023. Waititi says, "I know I won't be involved. I'm going to concentrate on these other films that I've signed on for." Interestingly, he did indicate that he was still working on his Star Wars film at the time. "It's still marinating. I've been writing it." Now, this film was originally announced on May the 4th, 2020, for the May the 4th, holiday, I guess what you call it. On the official Star Wars website, the company stated Academy Award winner Taika Waititi, who recently won Best Adapted Screenplay for Jojo Rabbit and directed the widely acclaimed first season finale episode of The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, will direct and co-write a new Star Wars feature film for theatrical release. The site added, joining Waititi on the screenplay will be Academy Award winner Christy Wilson Cairns, who received a BAFTA Award for Outstanding British Film of the Year on the three-time Oscar-winning film 1917. But there has seemingly been no movement on the film since it was announced back in 2022. Waititi told the New York Times, "I'm going to write the Star Wars idea at the moment. I've got to see how that goes, because once I submit it, that might determine when it gets made or if it gets made even." He added, "I am cool as well to take 6 months off and just go hang out with my kids." Back in May 2023, he told The Hollywood Reporter, "I got a really good idea for it. It's just with all films, it's this middle part. You're like, what's going to happen?" Yeah, that's called writing, Taika. And then you look at those films that are so great. You're like, well, I guess I don't want to read his words anymore. Good Lord. He is just so up his own butt. It's insane. But back in September 2023, he admitted he'd been unable to finish a script for the film. While presenting an award to Deadpool movie director Sean Levy, he said, after Levy has had his way with the franchise like a cruel, indiscriminate virus, he'll move on to another and another and another, and eventually probably Star Wars. He added, unlike me, I hope he manages to finish a script for that. So there you go. He's probably gone. And so, look, this is a step in the right direction. Getting rid of Leslye Headland, getting rid of Taika Waititi, getting rid of people like this is a good step for the property. However, you are not treating the cause of the problem. You are treating the symptoms of the disease. You are not treating the sickness itself. Because as we see in this tweet here from Culture Crave, Kathleen Kennedy will reportedly remain as Lucasfilm president until at least Q2 of 2025. Several new Star Wars shows are in development that haven't been announced yet. This is not good. This is not a good thing. Kathleen Kennedy is the reason for all of these problems. And we had heard that her contract was ending in October. The fact that she's being extended at least to Q2 of 2025, that means that we're stuck with her until at least the spring or early summer. And you got to wonder what this means. You got to wonder if this means she's going to keep going. They're happy with what they could not be happy with what she's doing. They just canceled this big, huge project that she funneled a ton of money into. I got to think that the reason they're continuing to keep her on is they got nobody else to take the reins here. There's no way they've got anyone even remotely ready to step in and take over Lucasfilm. Who are you gonna have to do it? You can't have Filoni do it. He's not a Hollywood business guy. He's not a producer. He's not like for all her faults, she at least spent time with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. So that's the thing, guys. We are getting rid of people like Taika Waititi and Leslye Headland, but the people that continue to bring her in, like Kathleen Kennedy, are continuing to remain at Lucasfilm, which means that more Leslye Headlands and more Taika Waititis are going to be remaining here, and that's going to be the major problem going forward. Is we have to get rid of Kathleen Kennedy from Lucasfilm. Otherwise, Star Wars will never move beyond what it is right now. And that is a shell of its former self, a shadow of the evergreen IP that we once knew, and a vehicle for social justice, DEI storytelling, and self-inserts for Kathleen Kennedy herself. So what do you guys think? Do you think Disney understands the problem? Do you think that they are trying to get rid of Kathleen Kennedy? Who do you think could take a place? And do you also get rid of everyone else at Lucasfilm too? Because she has infected that entire company. You know, everyone from Pablo Hidalgo to Dave Filoni himself, they are all infected by the KK mind virus, and they all got to go. So sound off in the comment section below and let me know. No one in any career anywhere in the world can fail as hard as Kathleen Kennedy and still keep their job. Yet somehow she continues to prevail and persevere. Under her watch, we're undoubtedly going to be seeing more shows like The Acolyte, and unless Iger and the C-Suite step in, we're going to see that horrific Rey movie headed by feminist activist Shameen Obaid-Chinoy appear on our screens, and no one wants that to happen. When pulling out a weed, if you just chop off the leaves and leave the roots underground, they're only going to grow back, and that's what's happening here. Kathleen Kennedy and her minions like Pablo Hidalgo, and yes, it pains me to say it, even Dave Filoni are the issue here. They're a plague on Star Wars. But the rot brought to Star Wars by these cultural vandals goes beyond virtue signaling. Under their watch, Star Wars went from being a franchise that focused on telling modern-day mythology tales that spoke to universal concepts like heroism, family, and the struggle between what's right and what's easy, to a preachy IP that's utterly in love with itself. Every moment of modern Star Wars feels like a salute to Star Wars instead of an attempt to tell a solid story. Everything builds to a nostalgia pop, and you can practically see Dave Filoni holding for applause every time they make a reference to the extended universe or the animated shows. One of the moments Kathleen Kennedy was panned for was when she told Leslye Headland to stop writing a Star Wars story and to write a Leslye Headland story instead. She was so close to being right. The issue here was the Leslye Headland part. If that woman had an ounce of talent in her brain, that helium-filled head of hers would topple over. When KK told Leslye this, she clearly meant to insert more of Leslie's personal political ideology and mental baggage into the show, and boy did she ever. But she was accidentally right in saying that they needed to stop trying to tell Star Wars stories. Instead, they need to tell stories. Unfortunately, you need talented, driven, creative people at the helm for that, like Jon Favreau, and he's gone after his movie. And as much as everyone wants to point at Filoni as the savior, he isn't. George was on top of him throughout the production of the Clone Wars, and Favreau had the final say on all matters concerning The Mandalorian. Rebels eventually got good, but it took some time to get there, and Ahsoka was putrid crap. I remember when The Force Awakens came out, I scoffed when George said they'd made a story for the fans and it was all fan service and he wouldn't have done that. I remember thinking, wow, George really hates his fans. But now I'm nearly a decade older and wiser and I'm starting to see what he meant. And that problem goes beyond political messaging. It all centers around Dave Filoni. The problem with Filoni is he's so in love with the idea of telling Star Wars stories that his awe of the product gets in the way of telling a solid story to the audience. And Kathleen Kennedy only cares about remaking the franchise into her own putrid image and injecting as much DEI nonsense into it as humanly possible. She keeps forcing Filoni to cloud his visions even further by continuing to insert her personal messaging into it. The end result is a messy Star Wars love letter lost in a feminist fever dream, holding for applause by an audience that doesn't exist. What Star Wars needs is a whole new management team composed of people who love and respect the IP but aren't so slavishly in awe of it that it gets in the way of their true talent, the ability to tell a story. Hey, thanks for joining us today, and I hope you'll join us Thursday at 8 p.m. EST for Toonie Talk TV. It's a live stream pop culture podcast where you can join in the conversation live and make your voice heard as a part of the Toonitown community. If you liked what you saw here today, please like, share, and subscribe. Click the bell icon to get notified of new videos as they drop. From all of us here at the Toonitown channels, I'm Marvin the Movie Monster. Now get out of here!